All right, episode 8 of Motorvate. Oh, get that. It's it's rhyming now. Aren't we getting fancy? And one of my favorite people in the industry on today's show, and I'm not sucking up, but it's Kate Davis, who is now the director of communications for IndyCar. But Kate, when I met you, you were working with NASCAR, and we'll get into this during the show today, but the things that you did for me just in the sport to help encourage me to go after dreams that I wanted to accomplish. You were a driving force in that. And so the title of today's show is Driving Success, because if I think of somebody in the industry, in the motorsports, media, communications industry, you have made that happen for so many people. So thank you for joining today.
Well, thank you for having me and thank you for that nice compliment. I'm flattered. I just take the approach of do my job and be nice and build relationships. So I'm so thrilled to chat with you today. And yeah, we've known each other quite a long time now.
Yes, we have. And it was so cool because I have to be honest, when I first started getting involved in the sport, um, it was like I got involved in the sport on the radio side, coming in from the outside world, and then I married Mike, and then it was like everything was like zoop. Okay, well now she's a driver's wife, she's untouchable. And you were one of the people that were like, "Hey, do you want to do this?" And I'm like, "Really? Are you're gonna let me do this?" And you're like, "Why? Why not? You're really good at what you do." So I mean, and I was just like, thank you for
It's so
seeing
funny.
something.
I noticed in the opening a photo from NASCAR Media Day when we had you on NASCAR.com hosting our NASCAR Media Day coverage. And that was a really fun day. And I was happy to see that in the opening there.
I put that in there on purpose because that was probably one of my favorite experiences ever getting to do, and getting that phone call from you made me feel so good. I mean, there were other things, and we'll laugh, we can talk about it, because you were involved in so many projects that maybe didn't even launch from NASCAR, but you were always my supporter going, "Hey, I'm going to try to help you out. I'm going to try to help you push you into this, or maybe approach this." And there's some people that we share mentor wise that we've got so much to talk about. So I
Yeah.
want to kick it off with, how did you get involved in motorsports? Where did that passion come from, and how did you even get started in the industry?
Sure. So growing up, I grew up in California, but my parents met and got married here in Indianapolis. So the Indy 500 was always a holiday in our house. Like my grandmother would come over. It obviously came on early in the morning for us. My grandma would come over. She'd make biscuits and gravy, and like the whole house stopped to watch the Indy 500. So racing has just been something that I have enjoyed since I can remember, right? And then as I grew up and found what I wanted to do and went to college, I went into television production. And, I was working at what was then called Fox Sports Net. It had just launched. Now it would be FS1. And I was working on a highlight show, and I was probably about one of five females in a group of 30 people that were just starting out as production assistants, and no one ever wanted to cut the racing highlight. And so that to me became a niche. I was like, I know racing, I'll do it. So I started cutting NASCAR highlights, and at the time kart and IRL highlights and NHRA, and it was really a nice way for me to rise through the ranks and separate myself, because I didn't really care about all the stick and ball sports that the guys all were, pining over
Obsessed with,
cutting.
yeah.
And then as I kind of, grew in my career and became an associate producer and a feature producer, there became an opportunity to go to the track. And that I really loved. I was never somebody who wanted to sit in an edit bay for hours on end and make pretty pictures. I wanted to be out in it and meeting people. And I've always been better at logistics. And I actually, I met a few people that were like, hey, you'd be really good at NASCAR, and there's a position coming open. In fact, the girl that was leaving said, you'd be really good in this position. It was manager of broadcast communications. And basically, the job was helping people like me that were TV producers come to the track and get their stories done and accomplish what they needed to get done. So after, gosh, it took a while because it was a weird year. It was 2001.
Yeah.
And I finally met the right people, and I ended up working with Jim Hunter, one of our favorite people
Oh,
mutually.
I know. And I'm so glad you said his name and I get choked up. I'm sorry because Jim was so awesome to both of us. I mean, talk about a man that believed in his girls, right? I mean, if you were a hard worker and he believed in you, there was no stopping what he could help you achieve.
Absolutely. He was someone that, looked at me and said, okay, she has no PR experience, but she knows how to get around the racetrack and she knows TV people and she speaks their language. And it's funny because I would use TV terms with him in meetings and he would not know what they were, like SMT, which means satellite
Satellite
media
media
tour,
tour.
or VNR, which means video news release. And he'd be like, oh, you're using all these acronyms. But we taught each other, quite frankly, and he took a chance on me and we taught each other. And I had to, explain to him why it was important to do certain things to make sure that our TV partners got it on their deadline. And it was fun. I really enjoyed learning from him. He was one of my favorite people in my career. And, I used some of the lessons he taught me every day.
One of the things that's crazy and why this job was so important that you took on in 2001 is because isn't that when NBC kind of came on, like NASCAR started getting like even more and more bigger with network, right? With all.
Yeah, that 2001, if you remember, was the first year that Fox was around as well. It was their very first race, the
Oh, that's
Daytona
right. That was
500, when we lost Dale Earnhardt, and I actually was still at Fox at that time. So yeah, 2001 was the first year of network TV for sure.
and it was such a big deal. And I love the fact that you really kind of had to educate a lot of people in the corporate office at NASCAR with broadcast TV talk because before, I mean, yes, the NASCAR was on television, but it was a whole new ball game. I remember feeling like, wow, like people were seeing NASCAR on like primetime TV on Fox, which that was a big deal for us.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
And so as you start navigating through that position, you started just getting all these new, it's like you just kept taking on more and more and more. So, I mean, how did you go about that? Were you just kind of going, hey, I think we need to start doing this? Or did people come to you? I'm just trying to figure out like how you just kept climbing the ladder.
A little bit of both. I would say, I am someone that sees holes and tries to fill them. I even said to someone at IMS last night, like, I am not a ball dropper. I will not let the ball hit the ground. I'm going to dive for it every time. So I think just being observant and seeing holes, seeing areas where we can improve. That's one of the things I love about my current job at IndyCar is that, when I got here in 2019, it was just before Roger Penske bought it. And it was they were redoing their marketing and communications team. And it reminded me of working at NASCAR in '01 because it's a small team. There's a lot of ways to make impact. And I kind of just try to find ways to make improvements and try to find efficiencies and make sure that balls don't drop on the ground.
Can I
That's been my whole mantra my entire career.
and it works because I ever since you left NASCAR and went to IndyCar, we're all crying on the side here. We're like, oh gosh, where's Kate? We don't. I mean, because anytime I want to ask a question, I'm like, crap, crap, I can't call Kate and ask her. Well, I probably could still call you, and you could probably still guide me in the right direction.
I
But
would.
yeah,
I would. And that's one of the things that Jim Hunter taught me, if I'm being honest. I don't know every answer. I'm not a competition person. I can't tell you about like technical things on either NASCAR race cars or Indy cars. I can't tell you that. It's not my jam. I am good at promoting a brand. So, I'm the first person that if you ask me something and I don't know it, one of the things Jim Hunter taught me was, I don't know. Let me find out for you and I will get back to you. And that's something I teach the people that work on my team now.
I love that you just said that because that is such a common sense approach, but it's like really the only approach you should have if you don't know the answer to something because we're so crowded right now by people giving their opinions. I mean if you think about it, you could probably get 15 different answers for one question sometimes on how to go about your job. Or if someone's just asking you a question on how does this operate, and if you don't know, I think we all feel like, well, if I don't know, they're going to find somebody else in 30 seconds, so I better just make something up. And it's like, no, just be honest and just
Yeah,
say, I
take a
don't,
minute,
yeah,
be
please.
honest, admit that you don't know, and then go find out and follow back up. Like I don't know how any other way to be.
Yeah.
It
It's like, it's so simple, people. Just pay attention here.
really is.
Yeah. I mean,
It really is.
so how did,
And never say, "That's not my job."
oh, okay.
That was
Thank
another
you,
thing that
girl.
Hunter taught me. Don't ever say, "That's not my job." It might not be your job, but it doesn't matter. Go find out the answer and follow back up with the person.
I'm going to touch a little bit on that because I love that you just brought that up. And I didn't know that Hunter was the one that taught you that. But it just seems like all of us in the motorsports industry, we do a little bit of everything, and it's 24/7, Monday through Sunday.
Mhm.
You don't know when news is going to break. You don't know when, I mean, sometimes in IndyCar, you're dealing with stuff in Europe and around the world. And I mean, the time zones are different, and you can't say,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I checked out at 5 o'clock, call me tomorrow. It's like, if you finally got a hold of that person that you've been trying to get a hold of, just pick up the phone and talk to them.
So it's funny you mentioned that because, I'm sure you saw the news last week that Penske Entertainment has acquired, excuse me, wrong word, acquired the Grand Prix of Long Beach Association. Big news for us, amazing
Yes.
thing. And I was working with a reporter with the LA Times on that story. We had worked with them so that it would appear in the print edition at the same time that we sent our press release out, and they would post it on their website as well. And so he was working on his story and was like, "Hey, I think I might have a few questions. What time are you done working?"
Did
And
you
I
laugh?
said,
I'm never,
"Never."
yeah,
I
I'm never
said,
done.
I mean, I technically leave the office around 5:36, but like you could call me whenever. And it was funny, he called me about 7:30 Eastern that night and had a couple of things that he needed clarified. And like that's the job, that's the gig. And if you can't, hang with that. And I say that to people when we're, in the hiring process. I'm like, this is not a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job. It's just not. No matter how you slice it, even in what I call the non-racing season, which is right now. It's not, I don't call it the off season because it's not off.
No.
The non-racing season because it's just as busy.
Yeah, I'm glad that you just restructure. I'm going to start calling it the non-racing season as well, because you're right. We're never off of racing. And I remember I was doing a charity event one time, and it was the people with the nonprofit that were complaining about the hours that we put in that day. And I just never thought about that, because everybody that volunteered, they weren't even getting paid, that volunteered their time to help me, never complained about how many hours, like that we had to get up at 4 a.m. and start
Right.
decorating and start putting price tags on these, or start checking people in, or, hey, so-and-so's flight got screwed up. Can you jump in the car and go pick them up? And I mean, and they were like, and people would be like, well, I wasn't really supposed to do that. And I'm like, I need someone to go to the airport. Okay. Like, I'm calling an audible here, folks. Just help me
Yeah.
out. And we got to get this job done. But I want to try to train young people coming up, young executives trying to come up, and make them realize that that's how we all became who we are, is because
Correct.
that's, we learned the old school way, and it's still the right way.
And even to this day, there is not one job that I would ask somebody to do that I'm not willing to do myself or will do myself.
Correct. Correct.
Just it's how it is. I move chairs in media centers still to this day. We had Lester Holt here at IMS we had every news station here at IMS for the
The
solar
eclipse.
Yeah, really fun day. But I went and picked up Lester Holt from the airport because I knew that it would be easier than us trying to get a chauffeured car in through the gates because we were expecting a really big crowd that day. And he was kind of shocked, if I'm being honest. He
Yeah.
was like,
Aren't you the
thanks.
director?
Yeah, he was like, "You're picking me up from the airport." I was like, "It's just gonna be easier. Trust me. We're gonna go in the back gate." And he sent me, actually, it's in my office, a really nice handwritten note that was like, "Thank you for all of your help. You helped us with X, Y, and Z, and thanks for picking me up at the airport."
Can I just say, I saw that I think you posted that note, and I'm like, how cool that she got a note from Lester Holt. And I will say, and I'm a Lester Holt fan, but then
Same.
I became a bigger Lester Holt fan when I saw that he took the time to I mean, he's like the big dog over there, right? I mean, he is
Yeah.
the guy for NBC News. And the fact that he took time to write you a note, a handwritten note. Johnny Morris does handwritten notes. And
Yeah.
I remember I heard about that from a lot of people in the industry. Chrissy Newman's like, oh yeah, I got this really sweet letter. And I'm like, man, I've never got one of those from Johnny. And just this summer, we went to Big Cedar Lodge, and he invited us to go to a concert, and he invited us to hang out in his suite with him, and it was really special. And his family was there. He's introducing us to all of his family. He's just such a wonderful human being. And the thing that was so cool is, like, a few weeks later, I got that handwritten note, and I've got it hanging up in my office because I'm like, look at me, I got my handwritten note from Johnny Morris. I'm cool now. But just how much does that mean when people take the time to write a note, especially in this day of texting and emailing?
It's everything. And I try to repay that favor to people that
I
have
do
helped
too.
me as well. There's something old school, you're right, about it. And it's just really lovely that someone takes 5, 10 minutes out of their day to send you a nice note and appreciate your work. I have one, it's in a box somewhere in this house because I haven't unpacked everything, even though I've been here for 5 years now. I have one from JD Gibbs that I'll cherish
Oh,
forever.
oh,
It was after, I think, Tony Stewart's second championship, so probably '03, '04. I don't even know. I'm bad at history. Couldn't have been '03 because that was Kenseth. '04 was Kurt Busch, so maybe '05, '06. Anyway, I framed it. I mean, it was just a really lovely note from a great guy, and I miss him. He was a good dude.
yes, he was. And part of your job when you were with NASCAR, and I want to get into the IndyCar stuff too, because I will say, like, I love IndyCar as well, but I've paid more attention to IndyCar since Jay Fry and Kate Davis are over there, and because I'm like root and I've noticed like the branding for IndyCar and everything since you've been over there. I'm like, yep, that's Kate. She's over there kicking butt, and we're getting all this coverage, and it just seems like it's just getting bigger and bigger. I always say that motorsports are cyclical. And it's like you've got IndyCar and NASCAR and F1, and I feel like they all have their moments where they get really, really big, and then they never really get low, but then maybe one kind of takes priority and gets more attention for a while. And I feel like IndyCar is kind of on that rise again, and and it's like I find myself getting more excited about watching the IndyCar races and what you've done with driver profiles and kind of showcasing the personalities in the sport is amazing.
Well, I can't take all the credit for that. Number one, I work on a really great team with really talented people, and I can't take all the credit for it. But it's an exciting time over here. I mean, we're getting ready to, have a new broadcast partner in Fox Sports. And, one piece of advice that I would give people is don't ever burn your bridges because you never know when you're going to work with people that you worked with 25 years ago, which is
Mhm.
happening to me right now. And I love it because I have still so many great relationships over at Fox. So yeah, that would be a lesson. Don't burn your bridges. You just never know. But yeah, it's an exciting time over here at IndyCar. We got really some awesome personalities, some really talented drivers, and some exciting things happening.
So how did that transition happen? And first of all, I never knew that you lived in Indy before. I don't know why. I guess I always thought of you as a California girl.
So I grew up in California, and then when I got the job at NASCAR, I moved to Daytona Beach, where I
Hmm.
met you. And then from Daytona Beach, I moved to Charlotte in '07, and then I was in Charlotte until 2019. And then I came to IndyCar and lived in Indy. So I had never lived in Indy until 2019 when I got the job here at
Okay,
IndyCar.
because you said your parents started there, so
Because
that's
they met and got married here in the late '60s. My dad was a volunteer USAC official, he tells me. And I still actually have, it's really cool. I have an old Hoyer watch of his that he used to use at the Speedway in the '60s. And he actually brought it to the 100th running. I brought him there in 2016 for the 100th running of the Indy 500, and he brought his watch. And now I bring it out for qualifying weekend every year. But yeah, no, they met and got married here. And then my dad said, "It is too cold here. I would like to go back to California." And my mother, who had never been, was like, "Let's go."
and that wow, I never even knew that. That's so cool about that
Yeah.
happened.
So
So
it's wild that I live here now. It actually snowed this morning.
it did? Oh,
It's about 30 degrees outside, and we're expecting more snow this afternoon. So I understand why he wanted to go back to California.
oh, bless. So how did you decide, all right, listen, I mean, because everybody at NASCAR misses you and still loves you. And how did you decide to go do IndyCar? Was it just like, hey, a new approach, a new tackle, a new challenge?
So, if you recall, at the beginning of 2019, NASCAR changed their workforce,
Oh,
and there
that's
were
right.
about 75 of us that were part of a layoff. And it was amenable, and I still have a lot of friends over there. And I was lucky because I had been there so long, I had a really long runway to find a new gig. And so I spent a lot of time that spring working for another mentor of mine, Carrie Gerlach Cecil, who people in the NCAA world call the Olivia Pope of sports. She is a crisis communications expert. So if you ever see an NCAA coach in trouble, 9 times out of 10, she's working with them.
Wow.
So I spent a lot of time working with her. I also kind of looked around politics and thought, I'm always been an avid politics watcher per se. When I before I got into sports television, I thought I wanted to be the producer of Meet the Press. So that has always been something that has been of interest to me. And I actually, if you remember, in 2012, Charlotte hosted the Democratic National
I
Convention,
do
and I
remember
had
that.
met a lot of people because they used NASCAR studios. Actually, the RNC used one of NASCAR studios as well as their like war room. So I met people on both sides of the aisle and, used some of those connections to kind of explore whether or not I wanted to go into politics. In the meantime, my good friend Mike Zizzo was a consultant over here at IndyCar, and he and SJ Lutke, who was the VP of marketing at the time here at IndyCar, who was a new hire, called me and said, "How quickly can you get here in May? We need help."
Wow.
And I said, "Well, I'm just getting back from vacation. I need a couple days, but yeah, I'm happy to do it. That would be so fun." So I had like a 6 week freelance contract with IndyCar to kind of see where I fit in and where I could help and all of that good stuff. And at the end of that 6 weeks, it's funny, I was getting very close with a political firm to get hired. And at the end of my 6 week contract, they were like, "Don't take that job. We want to bring you over and make you the director of communications." So here I am.
How, I mean, talk about like how that, I mean, it's like I think a lot of people sometimes feel like, well, she just knew somebody, that's how she got the job. And it's like, oh my gosh, if you only knew all of the, I mean, just the hours, the time spent, the connections, and how hard it is to become the director of anything. Let's just put it right there. I mean, how gratifying that had to be for you to know and then to see the sport like it's how it's growing. You have a good team over there.
We do, and I'll tell you, it's funny, in the first couple weeks after I got laid off, I heard from a lot of people, and that was really great. And Jay Fry, who was the president of IndyCar, was one of those people, and he was like, "Hey, I'm working on some things over here. Give me a little bit of time." And, that ended up working out, but it was nice to know, and, your compliment earlier is very lovely as well. It's, I if anything, I always feel like integrity is really important to
Mhm.
me and relationships are really important to me. And when you put in that work, it comes back to you. And I kind of feel like that's how my situation was here. And then, strangely enough, I was here 6 months and Mr. Penske bought the Speedway and IndyCar. And, it was really fun. The first day that he was here, somebody went to introduce me to him and he was like, "Oh, I know Kate." And I felt really,
You're like,
complimented by that because I had probably not seen him in a few years. And I think that's an important message for young women as well is, take the time to build relationships no
Mhm.
matter who they are with, because you just never know when you're going to run into someone that you've worked with before or when that connection could turn into a gig. And I try to repay that favor a little bit sometimes too. If a college student reaches out to me and wants 30 minutes of my time just to chat about how they can get into motorsports or get into sports, I will do it. I will find time in my calendar to do it because I don't think people do that enough. I wish more people would try to network a little bit more.
Mhm.
So I always, in fact, I've got an email in my inbox right now of somebody who wants 30 minutes of my time that I need to get back to. So
To see. Well, the fact that you just admitted that you try to give that time back, I think that's so important because one of my biggest pet peeves, and this really irks me, and it's like it's almost like there are some people that maybe I don't know very well or that are still working their way into the sport, and if you call them or email or text and they outright just ignore you and don't even respond, That is probably my biggest pet peeve because I don't care if you
I
call and
agree.
tell me no. That's fine. Just respond.
I agree.
So
And in
easy.
fact, it's funny. So there's a young lady who's working in the motorsport space now, and she's building her own, followers on Instagram and is working in brand marketing and stuff. And we communicate a lot now. And she was like, when you were at NASCAR, I'd sent you a note and you never, or I'd applied for a job and no one ever, responded to me. And I felt terrible. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that happened to you because, I'm glad you persevered because now she's, very active and doing great and building her own brand. So I really try to make sure I get back to folks when I can.
And so I've got a great lesson and a fun story about that, and you'll get a kick out of this because when I first was in college, and you know me, I'm kind of like, hey, I just thought I'd graduate college, and I had an internship with NBC, and I was doing sports, and I thought, well, I'll get a job so quickly, and then you graduate, and you're like, oh wow, okay, no, I didn't. Well, there was an opening for the morning show girl at a radio station, it's WNCI in Columbus, Ohio. And I'm like, I could do that job. I'm fun. I got a lot of energy. If they need somebody young on there. So a little cocky me, I go and I do this resume tape. I just found the resume tape that I did on I was doing iMemories like digital from VHS tapes. And I'm like, Ma, I cannot believe my dumb butt did that. Like, I mean, I'm in a radio studio and I'm telling this like huge guy in the industry why he should hire me. And I was cracking up at myself watching this. But so I sent him the resume tape, right? And I think,
Right.
like a couple weeks later or whatever, I get a letter back in the mail. And his name was Dave Robbins, my biggest mentor in life and radio, everything. I loved this man. And he sends me back this letter and it was like, hey, great tape, da da da. Let me give you a piece of advice. Maybe just start off at a 3,000 watt radio station. Basically, like go get a job that someone out of college gets. You're not going to start here,
Right.
but go do that, get some experience and reach back out later on. So fast forward about, 6 months after this happened, mine might have been 7 or 8 months. Harry Connick Jr. was doing a private concert for this radio station. Well, I knew the producer and talk about networking, right? So
Yeah.
I called the producer and I'm like, his name was Merlin. I'm like, Merlin, please get me. You don't understand. I love Harry Connick Jr. I'm so poor. There's no way I can pay for this ticket. Can you please get me into this like lunch deal? And he goes, well, it's like a thing that we just give away for listeners, but I will sneak you in. Okay. And bring a friend. I'll get you two. I'm like, oh my God, you're the best. Thank you. So I remember I got all dressed up. I wore this pink suit, and I'm like, I'm going to get all dressed up. We go to this lunch concert. It was on the top of One Nation. And I'm sitting there with my best friend from college, Amy. And, I'm sitting here like over Harry Connick Jr., just so excited about watching him perform on the piano. And all of a sudden they go and they introduce Dave Robbins. They go, here's our program director, Dave Robbins. And I'm like, that's the guy that sent me the letter. Like, that's the guy that sent me the letter. And Amy goes, go introduce yourself. And I was like, and she's like, what? Who are you? You're not the Angie I know. Go introduce yourself. So I go up. Hi, Dave. I'm Angela. My name was different than mine. I'm Angela Young. And I said, I sent you this and you sent me, and I did. He goes, did you do what I said? And I go, yes, I went and I'm working at a 3,000 watt radio station. I'm the news director there. And he goes, that's awesome. That's awesome. Great, great, great. He goes, well, hey, give me your card. I'll keep in touch. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I get a phone call. And he calls me and he goes, I want you to come up to Columbus and I want to interview you. I'm like, okay, so long story. I'm sitting here dragging on, but I go and I do the interview. He says, I don't have an on-air position. I'm like, well, I'm talent. What do you mean you don't have an on-air position? He's like, well, you can be my assistant, but I'm going to teach you a lot in the industry and I will get you back on the air. But you will be my assistant and I will take you under my wing. And I'm like, okay, well, one of the first jobs that I had to do was send the letters to all the people that applied for the job. And I go in there and I go, you give everybody these? And he's just like, yes, I do, Angie, because it's
That's
important
awesome.
to respond and to keep people, invested in
Yep.
networking. And he goes, did it not encourage you? I go, yeah, I put that letter on my refrigerator and I looked at it every day until I got the 3,000 watt radio station job. And,
There you go.
and
And you know what? And that's a good lesson too, is that sometimes you have to take the job that isn't exactly the best fit
Mhm.
to get your foot in the door.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So I would encourage people not to, even if you think you want to be in racing, but there's a job in minor league baseball that gets you the experience that you need to maybe then get the job in racing, do it. I tell kids that all the time.
Well, and I love that, and that's the message of this podcast is to give people advice and to share our stories. Like right now, we might be in positions that you are aspiring to be in, but we want to let you know about the journey getting there because it's not
100%.
always easy. I mean, are there some stories that you can share where you just felt like, well, I really failed at this and now I'm going to make it better, or maybe you didn't get a job that you really wanted and how you kind of overcame that adversity? You
That's a
you're
good
you
one.
you're such a good hole filler. You typically just find your own kind of gig and you're like, "Okay, I'm going to make this happen." But wait, here's a better question. How about was there any a time that you went to maybe somebody at NASCAR, IndyCar, Fox, whatever, in all your different roles that you saw a hole and you knew it needed to be filled and they were like, "Nope, I don't want to. No, you're wrong about this." And
Uh, that's a hard one. You know what I do remember, and your previous answer was making me think about this. So when I got into being a production assistant at Fox Sports, I had been an intern there for they purchased a bunch of regional networks, and I was working at one of them called Prime Ticket in LA. And I'd been an intern there for my senior year, probably 6, 7, 8 months. And I had a really great woman, Asia Berkeley, who was my supervisor, and I still talk to her today. She's awesome. She's been a TV producer for years and years. And I went in and I, pitched myself for a PA position, and this gentleman named Tom Riley was like, "Well, I don't know, like, I don't know if you have enough experience, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, he's like, "I'll think about it." And I was like, "Oh, all right." I left Riley's office. I walked out into the hallway, and Asia was like, "How'd it go?" I said, "Well, not that great. I don't think he's gonna hire me. He said he'd think about it, but that, he's got other people that have more experience." She goes, "Kate Davis, you are the best intern I have. You walk right back in that office and tell him that he needs to hire you." And I was like, "Okay." So I did.
you did
She was
it.
right. And I got the job.
I love that. Jamie Little had a similar experience where she basically just said, "Who's the decision maker?" And I want
Yeah.
this gig. I think I deserve this, and I'm not, and I won't let you down, right? Like I'll
Yeah.
prove to you. And so I think that's such a great lesson to share with people about kind of going after what you really want because that's the one regret. And I don't like to say regrets. I got to come up with a better term, but I sometimes I felt like, well, I'm not going to go after that because I don't want to be embarrassed by being told no. I don't
Yeah.
want them to
And
look at me and tell me you're not good enough or no. So you know what? I'm just going to sit back here and wait for them to call me. But they don't call you, Kate. You've got to go after it.
yeah, and I will tell you a funny Jim Hunter story too, is that, early days of me working there and we're still figuring each other out and all of that. And I said, "Jim," I said, he was like, "Why isn't this reporter coming to this event?" And, we need to figure out why they're not covering us more and blah, blah, blah. And I said, "Well, hey," I said, "do you think that it would be possible for us to get the list of credentialed media a couple weeks ahead of time from the racetrack? And then we could see where the holes are and reach out to those people directly and say, 'Hey, why aren't you covering this event? Like, can we make a call for you to your editor? Is it, you need a cheap hotel room? Like, how can we be of assistance to get you to this race?" And his initial response was like, "Why the hell would they give us that list?" And you can hear him saying that,
Oh,
can't you?
yes, exactly.
And I was like, kind of taken aback. And I was like, "Well, why wouldn't they give us that list?" He's like, "They don't have time to do that for us," and blah, blah, blah. Well, now, even today at IndyCar, the promoters will give us their list a couple weeks ahead, and we then pass that along to the paddock as well so that people can go out and pitch stories to those folks that are going to cover the race. But and at NASCAR, a year, not even a year later, maybe a couple months later, he was like, "You were right. That's an easy lift that we can have them send that." But his initial grumpiness was
Mhm.
like, "Why the hell would we do that?" And now that's something that's like standard practice
I
for
love
most
that.
racing teams.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's just like it's the intimidation. It's like I've got a great fun Jim Hunter story, and you were probably with Jim. I guarantee you were with Jim when this happened. You probably are the one that arranged to help me out here because remember, and I think you probably helped me get this gig as well. The National Egg Board did a Think Fast, Think Eggs campaign. This was like back in 2005 3 or 4. So I can't remember
I
exactly
don't know that I remember
when
that
it
one, but
was.
go on.
It was this crazy deal. And so the National Egg Board called the Wives Auxiliary, which I wasn't even a part of at that time, and they said, hey, we want to get some women to do this campaign. They're going to, like, race, cook omelets, and they were trying to promote the fact that if you didn't have bad cholesterol, you could eat as many eggs as you wanted in a week, because we were all in the mindset at that time that
Right.
you can't eat a lot of eggs. And so they call me up and they're like, hey, Angie, will you help spearfish this deal? And at the time, I was arguing with the Wives Auxiliary because they were giving only Cup drivers money and I'm like, the Cup drivers don't need the money. It's the guys in the trucks and in the late models and in the Xfinity that actually need the help if they get injured. So if you would include the truck wives and everybody else, and they're like, well, it's really a Cup deal. And I'm like, well, I'm a truck wife now. Okay. And you're asking me to do this big deal for you. So include everybody and I'll help. So we end up doing this, and I think it was at Homestead, and that's when I learned what an SMT was, the Satellite Media Tour, because we sat there and did a satellite media tour in Miami at the final race of the NASCAR
Sure.
deal. And thankfully, I did win the omelet cook-off. I did cook the omelet the fastest.
Nice
but the thing that was so funny about it is afterwards, they wanted us to go to New York during the banquet, the same week as the banquet, and do more media and publicity. And they had like ESPN Cold Pizza at the time. They had Fox and Friends. I mean, they had a lot of really cool gigs for us to do. But the hotel room that they put us in was shady. And here I am by myself. And Mike, because Mike's like, I didn't finish in the top 10. I'm not going to New York. I don't want to go remind myself that I didn't do well this season. So I fly up there by myself. And when I went into the hotel room, I was like, oh, I do not want to stay in this hotel room. I don't feel safe. I don't even want to touch anything in here. And so I'm like, who do I call? Jim Hunter. So I pick up the phone and I'm like, Jim? And he's like, hey, Ange, is this important? And I'm like, yes. And I'm like almost in tears. And he goes, okay, because I'm at the White House right now. Because you guys were all doing some big press event with the champion at the White House, like getting the official thing. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm like, I'm in this awful room and I know you could get me a better room. Is there any way you can help me? And he was like, oh my gosh, Angie, I'll call you back in 5 to 10 minutes. I'm at the White House with the president. I was like, I don't care. And so anyways, he calls me back. I'm thinking,
so funny.
I swear you were probably with them. You guys all probably had a laugh about it. And
So it's funny. I think if memory serves the timing, it probably was in 2003 when we took the entire top 10 to the White House.
I think you're right. Yes.
And we had cars, all of their cars, and we had the top 10 drivers. And I actually had traveled with Jimmy Johnson that day and one of our VPs out of New York, because Jimmy was doing Regis and Kelly that morning. And so we were like the last plane out. And this is a crazy story. So after we did the whole thing on the South Lawn, there was some media that they wanted the guys to do. And so we ended up on Pebble Beach, which is where you see the reporters all doing their stand-ups. And people were doing their interviews and then going back to their cars and what have you. And all of a sudden it was me, Mike Zizzo, Marty Smith from ESPN, and Bobby Labonte.
Oh, I love it.
And no one else out on Pebble Beach. And we were like, where are we supposed to go to get our cars? Like, what's the deal? And Hunter called me and was like, get to your car. Like, it's time to leave. And I was like, Jim, I'd love to. I'm stuck on Pebble Beach. I don't know which way to go. And I'm not kidding. A maintenance guy walked by, recognized Bobby Labonte from him being there previously when he was the champion. And he led us underneath the White House, through tunnels, showed us where, some old brick was from a fire years ago.
Oh my gosh.
And then we finally got out to where everyone was waiting for the cars. And Hunter's like, what took you so long? And I was like, you don't even want to know. I'm just happy to be here. And he's like, I remember he patted me on the back and he was like, welcome to the White House. And I was like,
and God bless it. Then I'm making phone calls complaining about my hotel room in New York, which, by the way, he did fix. The best part is he calls me back in 10 minutes, like he said he would do. And he said, Angie, go to the lobby, get a taxi. I'm like, I'm already in the lobby. He goes, get a taxi. And then I think it was funny. He goes, go to the, because you guys all stayed at the Waldorf at that time.
We
Everybody,
did, yeah.
that was a big
Yeah.
deal. And I'm like, I'll share a room with somebody. I don't care. Just get me to the Waldorf with everybody. He goes, well, there's no rooms left there. But he goes, I think Mr. France has a suite at one of the other really nice hotels. And he's like, just go there. And I'm like, Jim, I can't afford that hotel. And he goes, no, no, Mr. France is going to take care of you. Just go to the suite. And I remember I got up there and I was like, I called Mike and I'm like, you should have came. I've got like the best room I've ever had in my
Right?
life. It was awesome. What are some of the other fun, like just some of the just experiences with some of the people in the sport that, because I mean, people don't realize like if you saw a driver on Regis and Kelly or on the Today Show or doing a big appearance at the White House, you had to be with
Yeah.
them. Like you were like their escort basically to make sure that everything went properly to represent NASCAR.
Yeah, and that's something I still do today in my current role. The Indy 500 Champions Tour is something that I love doing. It takes more than one person. A colleague and I work together on it. But it's fun. But you also, you got to know your way around the city too, right? If you have to get from Sirius XM to NASDAQ on foot because there's too much traffic, you got to know which streets you're going on, right? I mean, you could Google map it, but
But
you got to look like you know what you're doing. So, thankfully, I've been in the city for many, many years doing that kind of stuff. I will tell you one of my favorite stories of those kind of times was banquet night in the Waldorf. I cannot remember who our champion was. It could have been Jimmy Johnson, but I ended up in an elevator with Jimmy and Shani, his PR person Christine, Curly, my good friend, Greg Zipadelli and his wife Nan, and she was pregnant, and Chad Knaus. And we're going down from, I think from like the Goodyear reception, like down to get ready for the banquet. And the elevator stopped.
oh my gosh.
And I mean, we're packed in formal wear, right? And
Yes.
I just looked at Greg Zipadelli and I said, you're a crew chief. Figure it out. Fix it. Get us out of this
You're going to fix
elevator.
the hole that just created.
I was like, I don't know what you're going to do, but you're the most qualified. So figure it out.
I love that you're the
And
captain of the elevator.
thankfully, we were up on like 17th or 18th
Oh
floor.
my
And
gosh.
thankfully, we were able to get the doors open and we were like just below the floor, so we were all able to get out pretty easily. And then when we got down in the other elevator, I remember looking at one of our security team members and I was like, shut that elevator down right now. No
Yes.
one else to get stuck in it. That was almost a situation.
I love the fact that you've always been able to take charge and you've never been intimidated. I mean, it didn't matter if it's the Indy 500 champion or Mr. Penske or a big time crew chief in the sport. You're kind of just like, okay, listen, we have a situation here, and you stay calm too. And I think that's a big. I always ask people, how do you earn so much respect in the industry? Because honestly, I'm not trying to just tell you all these compliments. I'm being very honest. You have one of the best reputations in motorsports. I mean,
Well,
I,
thank
I,
you.
I don't know anybody that's ever said anything bad about Kate Davis. And I know,
I'm sure there's someone.
no, no. I mean, and if they did, they're going to apologize because they were just being whiny babies because you've always kept just a clear, calm state of mind and you always get the job done.
Honestly, those are my favorite moments, if I'm being honest. Like I thrive in the chaos. I kind of love it. I don't know, it's just a weird thing, but I'll tell you, I can't turn it off. So I'm the proud aunt of a 17-year-old rookie in the Western Hockey League right now, Ben Davis, who plays for the Wenatchee Wild. And I was there 2 weekends ago for family weekend, and they had a lovely little reception for the families before the game. And the woman who was organizing it said, hey, we're going to bring the parents out on the ice with your child for the game tonight. You need to be there by 5:20 and, make sure you're where the autograph session was last night. And FYI, but I have to leave. And I'm not joking. At 5 o'clock on the dot, I just automatically was like, hey, everybody, it's 5 o'clock. You have 20 minutes to get to the tunnel where you're supposed to line up for your thing. And everyone just kind of looked at me and I was like, I work in sports.
I
I
can't.
cannot.
Yeah, yeah.
No.
I'm
Like,
doing
even
this.
my brother was like, "Woman," and I was like, "Sorry, I can't turn it off. Like, I'm doing her a favor. She's gonna be upset if these parents aren't there by 5:20, but like, they need to get the show on the road and get over to the arena."
So my nickname in our family is the General because I'm usually like, okay, everybody, listen, like I'll host a dinner party and I'm like, the food's out. It's getting cold. I'm getting angry. I feel like we're all on air right now. Like, let's go. Like, time
Yeah,
to everybody start, getting your nourishment. Or, okay, it's time to leave. Like, everybody cracks up.
yeah.
They're like, Angie has no problem being straightforward. And sometimes I think people are like, you're so direct. It's intimidating. I'm like, I'm not trying to be intimidating. I'm just efficient. I'm trying to,
Yes,
right?
right.
I
And
mean,
it was so funny because they just were like, "Who's that girl?" And I was like, "Sorry, I work in sports. Just choppy, choppy. Make sure you get over there."
hey, the world needs us, okay? The world needs us. There was one thing because I always stalk your LinkedIn because I love your LinkedIn,
All
and
right.
you put that. Tell me if this is still on your desk. A quote that this is a positive thinking area. Make it happen.
So yes and no. I still abide by that, but I don't have that actual sign on my desk because it's in a box somewhere in this house.
That you haven't unwrapped in 5 years.
Yeah, I'll get there. Maybe I'll get there over the break, over the, winter break. Because I do love that. And I do, I actually somewhere there is a photo of me with that on top of my head in my old NASCAR office. I do think that. Like, you know, you're much better off to have a positive attitude. It's real easy with the grind of motorsports to adopt a negative
Hmm.
attitude, but it's fun. At the end of the day, it is cars going around in circles, right? Nobody is curing cancer over here, right? We're not fighting a war. Like, that's not our job. We're literally promoting cars going around in circles. And we're pretty lucky to be able to do it. So there's no reason not to have a positive attitude. I also have another one that my friend Carrie Gerlach Cecil told me years ago, and I love it too. It's PR, not ER.
Yeah, it's PR, not ER. That is
Right?
a
At the end of
great.
the day, like, the only reason to yell is if something is on fire. Like, stop it.
So it's so funny that you just said that because one of the new and you know my husband Mike very well, and so we've picked up pickleball. And I'm
Oh,
going to try again to make it a New Year's resolution that I can play pickleball with my husband on the same team because we are both so competitive. And I think I'm trying so hard to please him and impress
right.
him that I fall apart. I don't know what I'm like. I can do this. I can accomplish this crazy goal. And so we all get to play in pickleball, and we're at these RV parks because that's our big hobby. We love
Yeah, yeah.
RVing, and we spend half the year up in the mountains at an RV park. And one of my friends who's been really successful in business, people start fighting over it. Like, that ball was out. No, it wasn't. Everybody's fighting. And he puts up his hand. He goes, folks. This is trailer park pickleball. Like, not even just pickleball. This is trailer park pickleball. Why are we all acting like such idiots
I
over
love that
whether?
so much.
Yeah, and because Mike will go, because I'll say, Mike, I don't, like, I'll say, I don't think that ball was out. Like, you called it out, and I feel bad. Like, the people over there are really getting mad at us. And he goes, listen, I'm used to seeing things at 200 miles an hour. And he goes on this whole thing, and I'm like, oh, here we go. I mean, so like, it's like the big joke that Mike is so competitive. So anytime any of my girlfriends like draw him
Right.
in a tournament, I go, I'm really sorry. I just want you to know that he loves you and he's really nice, but he can't turn off the competition. And I'm just going to blame NASCAR and racing for
Yeah,
so long because
100%.
he can't do it. Listen, he can't do it. And maybe he does see the lines better. I don't know, but I'm just letting you know right now that
That's
don't
funny.
let anything he says to you offend you or hurt your feelings or make you feel like a horrible person. And they're like, "Why aren't you playing with him?" I'm like, "Oh, that's a good question because I don't want to get a divorce because I really like him. I'd like to stick around, but I'm going to pull this off. I like it. This is a positive thinking area. Make it
Yes.
happen. I'm going to say that in pickleball. So this is not just for business, right? It's just for
Yep.
your being happy
It's
in
for
life.
life. I will say there is one sign on my desk right now that says, nevertheless, she persisted. And
Oh,
that has been something, I've had in the last few years. I've lost both my parents, and that was challenging. And obviously, the transition from NASCAR to IndyCar was a little challenging. You never want to, be let go from somewhere, even though it was I wasn't the only one. And I think, nevertheless, she persisted is just a really good mantra to have. Like, don't let things get you down. Just keep going.
that
Keep
is
going.
nevertheless, she persisted. I'm totally going to
Yep.
steal that from
Just
you.
keep going.
I love that. So at the end of each episode, I like to do a little bit because, I'm geeky like that. And so if you look in the rear view mirror and there was something that maybe you go, not that you maybe regretted it, but maybe I should have approached this a different way, or I wish I would have done this differently, or just turn it into a good piece of advice. What would it be? Just kind of looking back on your whole career.
So I think perspective is a really good thing. Early in my career, I probably let some stuff get to me that I shouldn't have. I probably lost sleep over stuff that I shouldn't have. And that's not to mean that I don't love the job that I do now and that I don't give 150%, because I do, right? But I think having parents that, I lost my mother suddenly, and then my father had cancer and I was his caregiver during that time, you know, again, it's PR, not ER. I gained a lot of perspective during that time and felt so lucky I was able to be his caregiver, but also just realized, like, cars going around in circles,
Mhm.
right? Like, super lucky to do what I do. I love it so much. I hope to continue to do it for a really long time, but it's not the end of the world. It's not life or death. And I think, if I were to look at, I think when I started at NASCAR, I was like 28 years old, 27, 28. If I were to look at that girl today, I'd be like, girl, just don't sweat the small stuff as much. Let it go.
I love that. I mean, I find myself, it's crazy as we get older and we get more experience, we start being able to. I was just talking with Kelly Crandall, and she's still young and she's still new in the industry. And I'm like, trust me, one of these days, this won't mean as much. Like those comments. And she's like, I don't know. I'm like, trust me, just you're going to call me in 20 years and go, you were so right. And it's exactly
Right?
like you said, just don't sweat the small stuff. I love it. It's, PR, it's not ER. And
It's
we're
PR,
we're
not
going in
ER.
circles, folks. We're entertaining
Not
people.
curing cancer.
Yeah. I love it.
Really
Okay.
lucky to do what I do, but yeah, not curing cancer.
And so now we got to look ahead because
Yeah.
we got to look out the windshield. So what's up? What's next? Maybe a goal, a bucket list item that Kate Davis is going to try to conquer?
Gosh, the bucket list, I'm gonna have to reprioritize, because I think that I love to travel, and I do that in the non-racing season mostly. You can see this little giraffe, oh, this way over my
I
head.
see
I
it.
picked that. Oh, I'm
This
keep
way,
moving the
this way.
wrong
Yep.
way. I picked that guy up
There it
in
is.
Kenya last November. So I've got to realign my bucket list stuff, because I've done some really amazing travel the last few years. Since 2018, I've done Ireland, Croatia, Kenya, and Morocco. I just got back from Morocco in October.
Wow.
So bucket list, I gotta reconfigure. But in terms of career wise, I'm super excited for 2025 for IndyCar. We got a lot of really fun stuff on the horizon. Having every race on network TV on Fox is going to be huge for our sport. Having Indy Next by Firestone events on FS1 and FS2 is going to be huge for that series. For those that aren't familiar, I would say, the NTT IndyCar series is like our Cup series, and the Indy Next by Firestone series is more like the Xfinity series. It's young up and comers in the sport, and for them to have that exposure on FS1 and FS2 is really going to be huge for that series. So yeah, I'm excited for 2025. Let's go.
I'm excited too. Listen, I'm paying way more attention to IndyCar these days, and you're a big part of it. And I'm not joking when I say that.
I appreciate that, but I can't take credit because I don't really drive a race car and will never drive a race car.
Well, listen, let's not talk about the one time I tried. And that was a Bandolero car and it
I
failed.
won't even get in, honestly. Like, I've done that a couple times in some pace cars with some people, but no, thank you.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I like to watch it. I will be a fan. And
Same,
exactly.
same.
Well, thank you. I know you're a busy girl, so I'm going to let you get back to work, making things happen like you always do. But thank you for taking out the time today to talk to me because it's been a lot of fun.
I'm happy to do it, and it was really fun. And yeah, if you are watching this and you're young and you want to be in motorsports, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to do it and happy to spend some time with folks as they're trying to figure out their path in motorsports
And she will
or any
respond
sport.
because she always does. I love the fact that still to this day, I will email you and I'll be like, listen, I'm trying to do this now. You're like, okay, hey, let me try to help you. Thanks for putting the bug in my ear. And you don't know how much that means to me to know that I could reach out to someone like you and you respond right away. And and sometimes it might be a month, but you still do it. And that's what's so cool about it. And I think if anything that I've learned from you is just kind of keeping up with people, responding and being kind. You're an amazing person, girl.
Well, thank you. That means a lot coming from you. I feel the same about you and Mike.
Thank you so much. All right, guys, that's all for this episode. They go too fast. Don't forget to subscribe, make comments wherever you get your podcasts. And in the meantime, keep motivating. Yay. Thank you.